5 years. 5 long, agonizing years of sacrificing everything, my time, my loyalty, my heart, for a woman who never deserved a single second of it. I stood frozen in the middle of our living room, my eyes fixed on the dinner table I had carefully prepared for our anniversary. The candle stood unlit. The marinated meat waited in the kitchen. An expensive bottle of wine she always claimed to love sat unopened. Tonight was supposed to be special, a reminder of everything we had built together. But as the clock crept past 8, my phone buzzed with text. Stuck at work. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I stared at the message, reading it over and over, my thumb hovering above the screen. Work? On a Friday night? On our 5th anniversary? It didn't add up. A familiar, unwelcome sensation twisted in my gut. The same feeling I had ignored for months. I didn't want to believe it. But the whispers, the unexplained late nights, the hurried phone calls, they had all been there. Clues I had deliberately overlooked. Not tonight. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to her office. The parking lot was deserted. No lights. No cars. No Camille. And that was all the confirmation I needed. She wasn't stuck at work. She was out with him, some young guy, probably barely old enough to drink, sitting across from her in some overpriced French restaurant, basking in candlelight while I stood there like a fool. I could already picture it. Her tossing her hair back, sipping wine I paid for, laughing like she hadn't just shattered 5 years of my life. My chest burned. But I didn't call her. I didn't yell. I didn't even curse. Instead, I typed out 2 words. No worries. Then I turned off my phone. I walked into our apartment and started packing. Not just an overnight bag, but everything. My clothes, my books, my favorite coffee mug. I wasn't leaving for a night. I was leaving for good. I loaded my truck and drove off to the mansion she didn't even know existed. The one I had quietly purchased a year ago. My escape plan. As I pulled into the long, winding driveway, I felt the weight of 5 years begin to lift. Camille had always thought she had me wrapped around her finger, convinced I'd forgive her like I always did. Not this time. I stepped inside, letting the silence of the mansion settle around me. The place was breathtaking. Marble floors, towering ceilings, a panoramic view of the city glowing beneath me. I dropped my bags at the entrance, walked to the bar, and poured myself a whiskey. The first sip burned, but it steadied me. Tonight, Camille thought she was celebrating her little affair while I sat at home, broken. She had no idea what was coming. She thought she had won. She didn't know me at all. I took another slow sip, watching the skyline stretch endlessly before me. 5 years of sacrifice. For what? For her to throw it all away on some boy who probably couldn't even spell commitment. I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her. While she was out giggling with her new plaything, I made myself a promise. She would regret this. Not because I would scream. Not because I would beg. But because I was done playing the fool. The next morning, golden sunlight streamed through the mansion's massive windows, casting soft streaks across the marble floors. For the first time in years, waking up alone didn't feel wrong. It felt like freedom. I stretched, feeling the ache in my muscles from hauling boxes all night, then reached for my phone. It was still off, had been ever since I sent that final message. When I powered it back on, the screen erupted with notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, a flood of frantic texts, all from her. I didn't open them. Not yet. I simply stared at the blinking alerts, knowing she had walked into an empty house and completely lost her mind. Good. Let her sit with it. I pushed off the bed, brewed a pot of coffee in the sleek, modern kitchen, and leaned against the counter, sipping it black. The bitterness matched my mood. 5 years. 5 years of marriage. And she thought she could sneak around behind my back? Lie straight to my face? Not anymore. Eventually, I scrolled through her messages. A frantic mess of desperation. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? I got home and your stuff is gone. What's happening? I smirked. She sounded panicked, like a kid caught red-handed. She probably assumed I'd stormed off in a fit of rage, that I just needed to cool down before crawling back. She had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. Setting my phone aside, I strolled into the walk-in closet, the same one I had started filling the night before. Suits hung in perfect order, watches lined up neatly. Everything I needed to move forward was already in place. Camille didn't realize it yet, but she wasn't just losing me. She was losing everything. The man, the money, the luxury lifestyle she loved flaunting to her friends. All of it was tied to me, and I was cutting her off. By noon, my assistant called. "She's here," he said. "Stormed into the office, screaming about where you are. Security had to escort her out." I chuckled, taking another sip of coffee. Let the games begin. I could picture it. Camille strutting into my company, wearing one of those tight skirts, convinced she still had control. Let her shout. Let her demand answers. "Tell her I'm not there," I instructed before hanging up. I poured another cup of coffee, completely unbothered. I wasn't at the office because I didn't need to be. Everything had already been set in motion. Assets moved, accounts closed, ensuring that when I walked away, I left with everything intact. Camille had thought she could have the best of both worlds, a little thrill on the side while keeping me as her financial safety net. The man who paid the bills while she played house with some boy. She couldn't have been more wrong. My phone vibrated again, another message. "Please, just talk to me." I ignored it. I didn't need to respond. She would understand soon enough. When the credit cards stopped working. When she came home and found the locks changed. Taking a slow sip of coffee, I let the bitterness settle on my tongue. The storm was just beginning, and I was going to enjoy watching it hit her full force. Mornings were spent sipping coffee on my balcony, watching the city wake up beneath me. Afternoons were dedicated to work, pushing my business further than ever before. Camille barely crossed my mind. She didn't need to. While I thrived, she scrambled, desperately trying to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. But I knew she wasn't alone. Not yet. Jeremy, the same kid she had thrown our marriage away for, was still in the picture. Tony, my investigator, kept me updated. "He's playing the hero," Tony texted one morning. Picked her up from a friend's place. Took her back to his apartment. I smirked, reclining in my chair. Let him try. I had seen Jeremy's type before. Young, cocky, thinking he had struck gold. An older woman, draped in luxury and class. Except Camille wasn't that woman anymore. No money, no car, no lavish home. She was broke. And soon, she'd realize just how alone she really was. I wonder how long it would take him to finally understand. Setting my phone aside, I wandered into the kitchen, plucking an apple from the counter. The mansion felt different now. Alive, truly mine. Every space was free of clutter, untouched by her presence. No more tacky throw pillows she insisted on keeping. No shelves overflowing with expensive perfume bottles. Just me, and I preferred it that way. I took a bite of the apple, the crisp tang hitting my tongue as my mind drifted back to Jeremy. He probably thought he was her hero, the knight in shining armor, swooping in to save her, offering stability. But the life Camille craved, the designer bags, extravagant dinners, luxury getaways, was out of reach, because I made sure of it. The joint accounts? Drained. Credit cards? Declined. The house she ran to after I left? Locks changed 2 days ago. Camille wasn't some coveted prize anymore. She was a burden, and I doubted Jeremy had figured that out yet. Finishing my apple, I tossed the core into the trash, dry my hands on a towel. Later that afternoon, Tony sent another update. They're arguing outside his apartment. She's yelling about money. I laughed, picturing the scene. Camille, arms flailing, voice sharp with frustration, probably demanding he pay for something. Lunch? A cab? Anything. And Jeremy? I could see him now, standing there, dumbfounded, finally realizing the mess he had stepped into. He was just a kid, barely scraping by on some part-time job, thinking Camille's charm was enough to sustain them. But charm doesn't cover rent, and she didn't have me to fall back on anymore. I strolled into my office, the cool hardwood beneath my feet, and pulled up my latest bank statements. Thriving. Years of hard work, finally mine alone. She had spent so much time flaunting my wealth, parading around as if it was hers to control. Now, She had nothing. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Jeremy wouldn't last. He had promised her a fresh start, probably swore he'd take care of her. But promises mean nothing when you're young and broke. I gave it a week, maybe two. That night, I poured myself a whiskey and settled by the window, watching the city shimmer beneath me. Right at midnight, Tony's next message came through. He dumped her, dropped her at a motel, sped off like hell. I grinned, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. 2 weeks. Even faster than I expected. I could see it now. Camille standing on the curb, pleading with Jeremy to stay, promising things would get better. And Jeremy? He had finally realized what I had known all along. She was a sinking ship. He had been in love with the idea of her, the long legs, the confidence, the thrill of taking another man's wife. But without my money, she was just a woman with nothing left to offer. I set my glass down and stretched, feeling the last remnants of tension dissolve from my muscles. Jeremy walking away was just the final touch. Camille had sacrificed 5 years of marriage for a boy who didn't even stick around when things got tough. I stepped onto the balcony, the night air crisp against my skin. She was alone now, probably curled up in some cheap motel room, wondering how everything fell apart. Did I feel bad for her? Not even a little. She made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. Leaning against the railing, I looked down at the city humming with life. Jeremy was gone. And Camille? She was finally on her own. Let her figure out how to survive without me. I had rebuilt my life, and she was no longer part of it.